Hello, and welcome to the Project Good podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Hilton. Project Good is a social impact podcast interviewing experts and advocates about the pressing problems that we face globally and hearing how they suggest we move forward in the future. The Project Good podcast is brought to you by Project Good Work. The goal of this podcast is to inspire people and organizations to develop a mindset that can move others to positive action regarding the complex social issues facing people and the planet. For June, we're focusing on social impact entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship plays a crucial role in addressing complex societal challenges, driving innovation, empowering communities, and creating sustainable impact. It embodies the idea that businesses can be a force for good, demonstrating that profit and purpose can go hand in hand. Social entrepreneurs often challenge the status quo and advocate for systematic change. They not only address the symptoms of social problems, but also work to address root causes and structural inequalities. Recently, there has been an emphasis on the importance of measuring impact and outcomes rigorously due to the major shifts that are happening in society. By using metrics and data to evaluate effectiveness, social entrepreneurs ensure accountability, transparency, and continuous improvement in their initiatives, driving broader systematic change in society. In today's world, social entrepreneurship holds immense importance due to its ability to address pressing societal challenges in innovation and sustainable ways. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Mission Flywheel founder and Chief Revenue Officer Paul Barani, who's working to give social impact organizations access to high-level executives who can give a skyscraper view to guide projects and initiatives to the path of success. Before founding Mission Flywheel, Mr. Barani was a sales director overseeing Foursquare's relationships with brands and agencies in the eastern U.S. Prior to that, he spent 6 years at Google, leading key global partnerships and vertical strategy for automotive clients. He's an agency entrepreneur at heart. He founded ClickSharp Marketing in 2007, which was acquired by WebLiquid, where Paul ran global strategy and operations. Let's get into the interview. Always a believer in the analytical foundation of marketing, Paul Barani was trained in traditional research-driven brand development at the NPD Group. Barani's work has spanned a variety of industries, including consumer products, healthcare, apparel, travel, and hospitality, with clients such as Avis, Hilton, Miller Coors, LG Electronics, and PayPal. After years of experience in marketing, sales, and entrepreneurship, he found his calling in building talent pipelines for organizations seeking to future-proof their technology teams. Paul Barani is the creator of Mission Flywheel, which dedicates itself to supporting mission-driven organizations to achieve their social impact goals by augmenting 5 key business functions: sales, business development, customer success, marketing, and revenue operations. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you so much for having me, Anne-Marie.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation because I think I was just talking to someone actually about that life has changed so much since 2020. It's like we went into I guess, a different realm. I don't know how to say it. But it's like we knew these problems existed, but they kind of just came to the boiling point. And now every year we have to brace ourselves and buckle our seatbelts, if not double buckle up for what comes next.
Yeah, well, I think it's there's what goes on and then there's what we know about it, right? And so I think that there's been some fluidity in terms of people are generally more informed across populations, generally more informed now compared to, maybe generations past. What are the issues affecting people across the globe, societies, affecting communities and economies? And so there's more awareness. I think we have the internet to thank for that. It doesn't mean that, access to that information hasn't come with a lot of its own hangups and presented other challenges. But generally speaking, I think, we're living at a time when a lot of different forces are coming to a head. And so I think the upshot of that is a lot of people that are otherwise, just kind of ordinary citizens are sitting up and taking notice and saying, hey, I want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And a lot of people believe that it's truly one or the other. And so that's I think, an important awareness that's driving a lot of good work, a lot of investment, and ultimately a lot of impact.
Yes, it's good to see that a lot of people are, willing to start facing the challenges head on. And I have one question before we dive into the interview questions. I always like to ask a fun question to learn a little bit of personal information about each person that I talk to. So what inspired you actually to get into the social impact space?
You as you were going through my background earlier, there's a lot of years spent in media and advertising. And I really owe a lot of my professional development to those years, learned great skills, met great people, worked on some big challenges. But one of the things that I started to realize was, as my kids began getting older and more forthright in their demands of me as a father, I started to realize that I didn't always have a great excuse for why I couldn't be with them, spend time with them, or drop everything to do something for them. And that really was what prompted me to start thinking about the impact of my work. To step back and say, all right, the reason that I can't go outside to shoot hoops with you, or to bring you on a car ride in the convertible, is because why? Because I'm out there selling ad impressions and clicks to try and sell products to Americans that maybe they need, maybe they don't need, right? And when I started to frame it in that perspective, I started to think, wow, this is a trade-off that's not really working for me. I want to be able to say that if I am heads down on something, if I just can't be interrupted, it's because I'm working on something really meaningful that is ultimately going to benefit you. So to me, working on education or economic mobility, working on financial literacy for underserved populations, these are the kinds of societal problems that I'm proud to be working on. And I'm proud to say, hey, look, sorry I can't go outside and play in the yard just yet. I can do that later, but right now I got something important I got to do as well. And it's coming back to them in some way, shape, or form. There's another short answer to your question, which is there was one particular book that a dear friend recommended to me when I was in a moment of transition, which happened to be squarely in the middle of the pandemic. And it's a book called How Will You Measure Your Life? The author is Clayton Christensen. And it was a book that came along at the right time for me, when my mind was open to start thinking about the meaning and the purpose of my work. And sometimes it's not so much what's in the book, but it's what's in your head when you read it. In this case, I would say it's a combination of both.
I totally can understand how you transitioned into that, because these days, as everybody knows, work can take over your life. And so having something that you're working towards that is already giving back to the people that you love is, invaluable. So I love your answer. So now that you started Mission Flywheel, and of course, just like probably everyone, or maybe it's just me because I'm kind of a nerd, I had to dive into researching flywheels. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, I like to work and build things. Usually, though, my stuff is more old-fashioned woodwork or ceramics or those kind of things. But I get the concept. And so I like how you dove deep and came up with an unusual name. I guess I'm attributing that you dove deep, but I guess tell me a little bit about why Mission Flywheel.
So kudos to you for doing your research. Some people are familiar with the concept, but many aren't. So a flywheel is one of those many moving parts under the hood in your car. It's a mechanical device that is used in cars, trucks, trains, aircraft. And what it basically does is it stores energy. It doesn't look like much. When you look at it, it just looks like a assembly of different metal parts. But what it does is where it sits in the process of generating energy is actually really relevant. So what it does is it captures momentum, and it stores the energy that it captures. When there are fluctuations in speed, it helps to maintain that momentum. It makes it easier to change gears. So there's a lot of good it's a good analogy for business, especially with startups, right? Where you need to build up a lot of momentum to create that initial inertia to get moving. And then there's pivots, there's stumbling blocks along the way. You get blindsided by changes in the marketplace. Everything that happens has an outsized effect on your business because you're small, you're growing. It's not like being in a huge corporation where, one customer walks away, you can absorb that with 5,000 other customers. And so I think there's a lot of interesting relevance here for founders and executives of mission-driven businesses that are in growth mode. Because to get your operation off the ground takes a huge push. And the flywheel is sort of how you store all of that. The energy that's powering your business is not continuous. Everything's changing and evolving. People come and go. And so when the energy comes in ebbs and flows, the flywheel is how you maintain continuity. And continuity is what investors like. It's what customers like. If you want to have any semblance of a fulfilling personal life, you probably want to have some continuity in your work too. And really, I think the last piece is to make sure that your mission has staying power and maintains relevance. You got to be doing this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so this is the most important part of the analogy. Whenever that engine is on, the flywheel is spinning. And so whereas, your workday ends, you close the laptop, you hopefully clear your head before you start up again the next morning, something in the background is powering you going forward. And the reason I use this analogy is to say that your mission can be that flywheel, right? Your sense of purpose can be what drives your business. It's not to say that all of the different functions, sales and marketing and finance and HR, they all come together and make a contribution. But that mission is the part that's 24/7, that's always moving, that's navigating all those changes and keeping your momentum, aiming for the horizon.
Yes, and speaking of missions, so a lot of this is just something I've observed just because I think of the times that we are facing. There's a lot of social organizations, some just forming these days because I feel like there's 8 billion people and 8 billion problems.
Yep.
And so there's always a new one. And so it's challenging. Just entrepreneurship in itself is challenging. But then when you add the social element, I believe it becomes even more challenging because you are dealing with issues that are not sometimes tangible. And so when it comes to these organizations, I believe it's sometimes hard. You might have your mission and you have your heart and you're like, okay, we're going to go out there and we're going to save the whales. We're going to save the forest. We're going to feed the children. But then there's the practical side, there's the business side. And I think a lot of these organizations sometimes, I think are missing that. And so what do you believe, this is what I've observed, but what do you believe is holding back most social impact organizations?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think that let's look at what's right. Money is flowing. So you can't say that they're under-resourced because take, for example, climate change, the impact investment that is addressing the urgent climate transitions. So there's really no argument to be made that it's underfunded. I think that ship has sailed. The question is more about connecting that investment to resources on the ground. A lot of, when you talk about efforts like saving the whales or saving the forests, a lot of what has made that top of mind in the average person's consciousness is thanks to grassroots efforts. It's because they've seen people come and go in their lives that cared about it, that said something about it, that did something about it. And the question is, those $1 trillion that are flowing over, the collective impact investment funds around the world, how are those getting routed to the resources on the ground where the work gets done? And I believe that it's not so much a question of will the work get done. Yes, there is a lot of machinery to work through to get them funded. But I think that what also holds them back, these organizations, they've got a rock-solid mission. They attract really good people who, by the way, often turn down opportunities to get paid a whole lot more money to do something very different, but choose to be there because of the mission, vision, and values of that organization. The question is, are you bringing the sensibilities of the mainstream world into that operating model? And that's really core to what I'm trying to do with Mission Flywheel, is to take experiences, working in a media agency environment, and similarly working at places like Google and Foursquare. You get access to a lot of different businesses. I've worked on every single industry vertical. I've worked on some big global brand in every single category, and you learn something different. You compare and contrast as you go. And all of that allows you to be a little more agile, a little more creative in solving whatever problem of the moment you sit down and start to grapple with. And so I think that what has been holding social impact organizations behind and will be less of a burden, but it still needs to accelerate, is good people coming from outside the orbit of these organizations, coming from more of the mainstream economies, where they come and they say, hey, I was, doing R&D in pharma for 30 years. I've decided to do something different. I'm taking those skills and I'm bringing them to climate tech, or I'm bringing them to healthcare, right? Or, I was an engineer at a big automaker for 30 years. And now in the twilight of my career, I've decided I want to pitch in on smart mobility because these cars are putting way too many emissions into the atmosphere. Right. So I think that's the big issue is, can we get more people from the other side to join the cause? And the money's there, the effort is there, and I think it's just a matter of time.
Yes. And so this leads me to another question. And this was something that I guess I have been maybe living under a rock. This led me to look into what are fractional executives. And so if you can, I understand it from actually the name of it, but, I wasn't actually familiar that this was a whole field of being a fractional executive. So can you explain that to our audience, what a fractional executive is?
Sure. It's a term that has become maybe a little bit of a buzzword, and maybe in spite of itself. I think that it's at the end of the day, the fractional model is a flexible labor model, not unlike part-time or consultant or freelance or interim, right? It's anything that doesn't fit into the box of full-time, 40-hour-a-week, 9-to-5 type of arrangement. Now, the way fractional works is there are some interesting caveats. When you're fractional, the first thing that is, I think, really important to sort of delineate is this is a leadership role. So as a fractional chief revenue officer, my role in an organization would be to be part of the leadership team. This person is typically reporting to the CEO, has peer relationships with the head of finance, the head of product, the head of HR, whatever it might be. And they own a department, right? So they're really, the scope is strategic leadership and direction across the entire business, but with real oversight of a particular department. They tend to be longer term engagements. So you don't bring in a fractional for 6 weeks because somebody is on a sabbatical, or you don't cover a maternity leave with a fractional. You're more likely to bring in a fractional in a growth stage when you say, hey, we need this C-level person. We're not prepared to make the investment and the commitment for somebody who's going to be full-time, maybe because we don't know enough, maybe because we don't have the funds yet, but we are willing to bring in somebody with that level of skill and experience and maybe pedigree, and we're going to do it with a fraction of the commitment. So they come in 1 day a week, they come in 2 days a week, they have all the same responsibility and accountability. They will still be accountable to the performance of that department and its business outcomes, but what we're doing is we're setting the table for the future. And so I think it's synonymous with high growth organizations where things move too fast, and actually committing to long-term hires can be a bit of a liability, right? What happens? The business changes, it takes twists and turns, and maybe that C-level hire that looked perfect a month ago is starting to look like maybe you wanted a different type of a skill profile and you just didn't know it. So I think that this is the reason a lot of businesses are waking up to this opportunity. And similarly, there are a lot of people, especially mid-career and later, who find themselves at a crossroads. It could be maybe they got laid off and are looking for something a little different. Maybe their family is growing and have decided they want to have a little more flexibility to be present. Maybe they just decided, hey, I want to get into something that's totally different to flex my muscles a little bit. Whatever it might be, on the labor supply side, a lot of very talented people are saying, I did this for 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is, and I was good at it. I've got relationships, I've got credibility, and now I'm going to do it for a few different clients on a fractional basis.
Yes, I love that, especially with our changes in work that we've had. So I believe it's probably just going to grow and grow and grow. I see so many benefits, especially for not only, senior executives, but even, especially like moms that have left the workforce and coming back and, maybe had high positions before childbirth. So yes, I love it. And so in these positions, one of the questions I have is, because of the, time, and I'm sure you encounter this with all your different projects that you work on, is how do you continue to engage the stakeholders and the communities affected by the issues that you're addressing and all the solutions that you're implementing?
Well, I think it's a good question. It's a question that probably has many answers based on the nature of the work that you're doing. I'll give you one example which sort of speaks to my ethos around this. So a few years ago, I was working at Udacity, a workforce trainer, recently acquired by Accenture just a month or two ago. And, Udacity was exploring something brand new. This is the middle of COVID. People are getting laid off left and right. And we knew intuitively, and the data from labor economists supported this idea, that many people were looking to change their career direction. So you have this, convergence of factors, people are dissatisfied with their careers, people that have intellectual and cognitive gifts that could prepare them for a career in something other than what they were trained for, but just haven't had the opportunity because of incumbency in those industries where they take a certain kind of profile, or because they didn't have the means to get into, a prestigious 4-year degree program, whatever it might be. And in this case, also, it was the middle of the worst part of COVID's sort of thunderclap moment in labor markets, where this was when the layoffs were happening like wildfire. So we structured a program working with the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio, which represented Columbus metro area. So you had over 1 million people in this metro area, and we knew that several thousand people were filing for unemployment every week, and that was many orders of magnitude more than normal. We created a program to offer these people an opportunity to upskill. They could choose digital marketing, UX design, or business analytics. So in-demand job pathways, very different from whatever it was they were doing. And we didn't care what it was they were doing. We just wanted to give them a way forward. And what we did, which was innovative, was we actually tapped into Department of Labor funding that is distributed to workforce boards annually. And we used that funding to actually pay for these people to go through the program. And so to get back to your question of how do we engage with stakeholders, well, ultimately, those students are the stakeholders. The workforce board, the employers, the different government entities that had some skin in the game, they're all stakeholders too. And we talked to them regularly, but it was the students where we engaged our internal program management team to make sure those students were armed with all the information they needed. Because the big insight we were trying to latch onto was, we don't want them to feel like they're just along for the ride. No, they are the protagonists in this story. They are the lead actors. And as such, they need to be armed with all the information everyone else has. And so we created a lot of different content for them. We created FAQs and webinars and sort of like open dialogue, ask me anything style events where people that were interested in this program and potentially going to commit 3 to 4 months of time to the program could jump on and hear what it's all about, listen to what employers in the community were saying about the program, ask their questions, and figure out, I may not be paying out of pocket, but if I'm going to commit several months of my life, I've got questions and I want to hear about it. And so I think that it's important to really define the diverse array of stakeholders, but then also to make sure that no one is left behind. And with technology, it's very easy. You can spin up a webinar very quickly. Thankfully, the hangups about having to do everything in person have been sort of thrown overboard, and we can just get on with the business of keeping people informed about what's out there for them.
I like that project, because it really started to affect people just at the everyday level, and so I'm interested to know, do you have a favorite project or organization that you worked with that you saw incredible change, or it just touched your heart, or I guess made you think differently?
Yeah, many. I have many projects that would sort of match that description, Anne-Marie. One that comes to mind is a project that I worked on with Amazon. Their program was called Career Choice. And the idea with Career Choice is to create opportunities for internal mobility. This is a topic that is kind of near and dear to my heart because I've experienced this as an employee, and I also see other people around me struggle with it, not to mention in the economy at large. Being in an organization doesn't guarantee that you can grow with that organization. And I think that when we look at the work that HR departments are doing to create a better employee experience, to create better opportunities for internal mobility, they're fighting such an uphill battle. There are so many forces at work that lead people to stagnate within organizations. So what Career Choice was doing, it was offering to the over 1 million warehouse workers at Amazon globally, it offered them an opportunity to enroll in subsidized learning, free of charge to them, no out-of-pocket cost, flexible arrangements to sort of fit around their work commitments, and to skill up in a wide array of different skills that they wanted. So that the program that we offered them was full stack development with a specialization in Java. And this is a very sort of basic table stakes transition to be an entry-level software developer. Now, you might ask yourself, if somebody's just moving boxes and driving a truck around, who's to say they're ready to actually do that kind of work? Well, we had some data that was collected over tens of thousands of assessments that indicated that the cognitive ability to be a software developer is present in about 3 out of 10 individuals. And that is a hell of a data point, because we tend to think that people that are writing code are some kind of unicorn, that, they're 1 in 1,000, 1 in 100. And that's why they're so hard to find. That's why they're so well paid, et cetera, et cetera. Well, no, actually, people's brains are wired. Roughly 1 out of 3 of them are actually capable of doing the work. And the reason 1 out of 3 are doing the work has nothing to do with the way their brains are wired. But if you find those people and you assess them and you declare that of X number of applicants, we have a subset that are actually, ready and fit the criteria for this program, and we're going to support them. We did a lot of customization to restructure our program to make it fit over many, many months because these folks have jobs. They don't want to give up those jobs. But what was really cool about it is that the Amazon program team made very clear to us from the start that the most scrutiny was going to be put on our job placement resources. So of course, they wanted to know, are we qualified to be training on these very technical concepts? They definitely wanted to know, what's the process going to look like? How do you identify who is actually ready and has that sort of brain wiring to be a developer? All of that was important. But where they pushed us the hardest was, do you have relationships with employers where you are prepared to have people step up and offer interviews, offer them a chance? Because Amazon's intention with this was, if people want to stay, they can take a crack at getting a job as a software engineer at Amazon. But we are happy to support them to find a job elsewhere. How amazing is that?
Wow.
They've had this employee on board for who knows how long, and they are now paying for that employee to learn, and they're willing to let that employee walk. But it showed their commitment to mobility. And I think I know that program is picking up steam, and I hope that it's sending a real signal to other employers that this is how you invest in your people.
Wow, that is amazing. I've never heard of such a thing.
Well, Amazon's doing a lot of things we've never heard of, but these kinds of programs don't get as much press. But that's why we have podcasts like yours to shine a light on them.
Yes, that's amazing. An employer offering opportunities elsewhere if needed. Looking to reach people who believe what you believe? Advertise on the Project Good podcast. Contact us at projectgood.work/podcast. Advertise today. But this touches on the core. I was thinking I tend to jump out and go into a skyscraper level of thinking that this program, this mobility program, actually hits at the core of one of the things that I think is one of the fundamental problems on the planet, which is, I think, that why we're seeing all of these different social issues is the simple thing of people want to see that the phrase like "I matter."
Mm-hmm.
And so if we solve that "I matter" phrase, I think a lot of these obviously we can't deal maybe the environment and things like that, but for the social issues, I think it starts to chip away at them when people start to realize they matter, because then they look at themselves differently. And then if they start to look at themselves individually, then they also start to look at others differently.
Yeah, I think that's a very profound point you make. It really comes down to our lived experience as individuals, and what's going to inspire somebody to join the fight and solve these problems. It's going to be the confidence that not only do they matter, but that they can hang, they can join the fray and be more than competent. And I think that it starts by giving people a chance.
Yeah, I love that you shared that project, because it, it really put the seed into, looking at all these other social impact issues. And, when you were talking earlier about how do we get, professionals to quote unquote join the fight on some of these issues, instead of just, hanging up their, what shall I say, their bag or depending on their profession, put away their stethoscope, I can't say the word right now, depending if you're a doctor. How do we get them back out there and helping these organizations that, have these different missions that they can contribute to? So yes, I love that you shared that project, because it really is the seed, I think, that then starts to motivate people to look outside themselves and see, like, okay, I have the confidence now that I'm able to do not only, deliver boxes, but I can program, and I can think about, really esoteric things. Now I think I can also, contribute to the broader society.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, love it. So I guess when you, what I would say, that's even a change in mindset. So I would think that when you have a new client or you approach new projects, I would assume, but maybe I'm assuming, but sometimes, if you assume, what they say, that you would sometimes face initial barriers in mindset. Does that happen to you? And then how do you deal with those types of challenges?
It certainly happens to me. I think it happens to everybody. And I think if somebody says it doesn't happen, you should ask again, because I think it's, when you start to really unpack challenges in a business environment, so much of them really come down to interpersonal conflicts. And I don't mean conflicts like, fists flying. I mean more in terms of differences in how different people see the world. So I think that, there's no silver bullet here, but I think that some of the things that really are important and can be levers of change here. The first thing is to really just get above the minutia and understand, does everybody articulate the problem we're trying to solve, the solution we represent, and really that's strategy development. Are we fighting the right fight? Are we solving the right problem? Is this the business we want to be in? And so you can, by asking very simple, deceptively simple questions, you can get some very, very complex insights into where those gaps may lie. I think that communication is critical. And so going back to your point about engaging stakeholders, right? Have you defined everybody that possesses intelligence or insight that can weigh in on the direction of the organization? But also, have you involved them in such a way that even if they're not involved in the development of that plan, are they prepared to take the baton and run with it? So communication is a way to source intelligence. It's also an investment in the sort of operational output. And you want to be measuring, right? You want to wherever you can bring objectivity to your whole sense of progress, because without measurement, you're left to subjective indicators of progress. And we all know what it looks like when people can't agree on how it's going, right? Are we succeeding here? Are we achieving? Are we delivering on our promise? Those are loaded questions. And in the absence of objective metrics, it becomes very hard to achieve common ground. You might get it, but it's going to be more like a game of roulette where you kind of have to get lucky, or somebody's got to do a hell of a job influencing everybody else. So, I mean, those are some of the principles. I think that it's so nuanced to the organization, but I think those are some of the levers that you can pull to get people on board, create consensus, and make sure that everyone's dealing with a full deck in terms of, what is the reality we see, and then define how they want to change it.
Yes. And speaking of that, you brought up the word metrics, and it stuck in my mind because in this space of social entrepreneurship, and especially when you're dealing with, large issues that might be like cleaning up the ocean or, the air and things like that, how when these organizations come to you, I guess, and this is just I get a broad questions for these organizations because I believe it's something that they always have to show. How do they show their impact when it comes to these big issues that make it effective that people want to continue in investing? I guess if you were going to give them 3 pointers, what things should they really focus on?
Well, 3 pointers. I mean, I think the first thing is to differentiate the commercial and financial metrics from everything else. So across businesses, we know that top-line revenue and operating expense and margin, net income, some of these terms that we learn in business school, these all are pretty universal. You don't see definitions for those terms specific to one industry or another, for the most part. So those are table stakes, and understanding that is one type of metric. It matters to your investors. It matters to, your ability to keep the lights on and make payroll and all of that. But I think differentiating those commercial outcomes from social outcomes is the first step. So if you are an organization involved in community development, that community could care less what your margins are, right? What they want to see is, have you improved our literacy rate? Or are you making services more affordable? Or have you reduced our poverty rate? Like those are like real outcomes associated with the social impact. And it would be very different, for instance, if you're in education, right? It's going to be a lot more around acquisition of skills or some change in the rate of social mobility, maybe, rate of retention or job placement. And so those are going to be very bespoke. And that's the second piece, I think, is really to once you've drawn a line between your commercial indicators and your social indicators, to be really, really prescriptive and as granular as need be, and a little creative, because the outcomes are really going to be a reflection of how successfully are you delivering on your promise. And the third piece I would say is just to be creative. Just because an industry doesn't traditionally measure itself in one way or another, doesn't mean that you can't be the first. So, for example, you look at media. In the media business, we tend to think of the audience size, the demographics, the gross rating points. We think about reach, and we think about scale and volume. What if you were founding the first company that was going to really focus on a socially responsible media product? How would you measure that impact? Well, has anyone ever tallied up all the different instances of disinformation and put them on a screen and said, look at how many billions of false statements we have dispelled or filtered out? Or has anyone ever counted the number of citizens whose privacy was compromised and then compared that to some measure of how they protect their audience's privacy. X number of data breaches compared to Y, right? Are they measuring, for example, the awareness of social issues just by using traditional research methods to say, we have delivered on our promise because our readership is more familiar with this issue or is more comfortable with that issue? Those are, I think creativity is the missing link there, because we can really do a lot if we just change the conversation about how this stuff is measured.
I obviously it depends on, what your organization is about, and what things that you need to focus on. So, it's probably, I would assume very different if you're looking at, air quality versus, feeding children, on how you're going to measure. Because air quality, I assume you get out there and you get your actual machine and put it in the air and run the air and say, it's still dirty out here.
Right.
Yes. So yes. Now, one of the things is that because there are so many challenges and issues that are popping up daily, this is hopefully I would hope it is a fun question. If you were to advise someone who wanted to take on a startup in this industry of social impact, what would you, what would your advice, or is there any, if you had to give them one sentence, what should they prepare themselves for, or what would you like to say to all social impact entrepreneurs as they launch out?
I would say know your story inside and out, practice it, workshop it, and really make it emotive. I think that, when you talk about your story as a social entrepreneur, that's what's going to bring people along for the ride. What you do, what you're selling is all secondary. And whether or not you practice sales, if you're in business, you're in sales. You can't run a business without selling something. And people buy from people they relate to. They buy for emotional reasons. So when you can articulate your mission, your values, what drove you to do this, to make this leap in your career, then everything else kind of flows with it. This is what I do sounds a lot better on the heels of a really compelling statement. This is why I do it. And I think that people that choose this path tend to be the kind of people who have a strong why to begin with. And that's why I say just invest in how you articulate it. Because when you get out into an entrepreneurial community, you're going to have literally thousands of opportunities to give that little elevator pitch. And it'll get better with time, but the quicker you master it, the better off you'll be.
I think that's great advice. And now this is kind of a question that I'd like to have you do a little reflection. Since you started out your career, looking at, offering products and in the tech field, and then now, you're in social impact, where you get to touch on, I would say, many different fields. Do you now view the purpose of business differently?
I do. I think that business, that's such a muddled word. It has so many contexts and it kind of spins every which way. But I think that when I look at the state of the world today, there's a cynic in me that says business created this, right? We sold more cars. We refined more oil. We cut corners on more medical procedures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because somebody wanted to siphon off a little more profit to themselves. And that's the cynical view. I'd be happy to debate that view with anyone, but there is a part of me that is conversely equally optimistic that the business community and really just the culture of capitalism can also solve these problems, because human nature, like it or not, has thrived under capitalism. And I think now that we are coming to terms with the collateral damage of the rise of capitalism, we're also starting to realize, okay, we broke a few things in the process, and now we got to fix them. And this system that we work in can incentivize us to fix them too. I mentioned this earlier. We've got $1 trillion sitting in impact investment funds waiting to be deployed for the climate crisis. Now, at the same time, you've got roughly $7 trillion, I believe the number is, in fossil fuel subsidies. So you put those two side by side, and that's probably as objective a measure as you're going to get for how much firepower are we putting towards the problem versus the solution. So when those numbers come into equilibrium more, we'll know we're on our way. But I do believe that this generation, especially young entrepreneurs coming out of school now, are armed with bright minds for sure. We've had bright minds throughout our history, but a really, really compelling sense of duty and obligation and mission. And I think just like an incredible chip on their shoulder to solve some of these problems. And I advise a lot of startups. I mentor in a few accelerators. This is my world. This is who I talk to all day long. And I'm continually impressed by how much energy and drive and altruism these entrepreneurs bring. And I think it's a validation of the idea that capitalism will solve a lot of the same problems it created. Unfortunately, we had to go in a cycle. It would be nice if we could, not have to just work back from what we created. But hey, once we fix this stuff, maybe there'll be a little bit left over for real progress.
Yes, I like how you are, capitalism, I never even, I've never thought about capitalism, fixing capitalism. But I see, definitely how that is it's a full cycle. Now, my last question for you is about, future seeking, but I assume because you are working with people who are big thinkers, that you have thought of big ventures for yourself. So what would you say for Mission Flywheel? How do you see your organization impacting the future?
Well, what I'd eventually like to see is that so going back to the origins of Mission Flywheel, this was years in the trenches, learning hands-on, by leading marketing and sales organizations, by working with major global clients, how things are done. And then applying this extra layer, this icing on the cake of saying, how about we take all of that and we narrowly aim it towards real kind of validated social missions. I practice that as a practitioner of sales and marketing. But ultimately, I would love to have people join the cause as practitioners and big thinkers, strategists of other functions, so that we could collectively go to an organization that has a big problem they're trying to solve, a desire to communicate their solution, and really tell the world that they've arrived in solving a problem, but not to be limited to just the skills that I know. So I'm hoping that other people will join and say, hey, I'd like to do that as your chief legal officer, and I'd like to do that as your chief product officer, etc. And so that's really my vision, is to build this into a model. And it goes back to your question about the fractional model, because as people with skills come of age, decide they want to do more purpose-driven work in their careers, they bring those competencies with them. They now have the competencies, the network, all of that, and they practice what they do best, but all aligned with this idea of solving problems that are faced by society. That's my hope, is that we can really leverage the emergence of these flexible labor models, the bubble of talent that is now deciding it wants something more from their work, and of course, the investment that is powering all of this in the background. So at the convergence of all that, I think, is the future.
I like it. It made me envision a drop in a pond, where the drop would be the person, and then when the drop makes the ripple. And so that be the new way of how people think, that you're the drop, but then you need to also contribute to the ripple. And that's how you work in the future, is that, you have your, what your talent is, but then now you spread that talent out to help everything and contribute to the quote unquote rest of the pond, lake, ocean.
Yeah. I like the way you phrase that. Absolutely. And it's that way of looking at it really connects the individual to a much bigger global movement.
Yes, I love it. Thank you, Paul, for your time and insight. If you'd like to learn more about Paul Barani and Mission Flywheel, go to missionflywheel.com. If you have a passion for an unserved community, a social justice problem, or simply want to change minds, contact Project Good Work at projectgood.work to start your project of change today. It's that time again. The Changemaker Conference is happening September 12th. Register now to attend for free at changemakerconference.com. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to Project Good Work, where we're focused on what matters.